right, we are here to talk wide receivers today. In case you don't know us, I am Nick from CWE. He is BC Steele, and we're excited because we're like, let's look at the calendar of events that's about to take place. Next week, the CFL kicks off, which might not seem like a big thing, but I love playing CFL on DraftKings. I did very well for myself. It's a great, highly suggest watching some CFL. It is a great filler for the NFL. To me, it even stands alone, but I get into all kind of weird stuff like that anyway. But so that's happening. We're about 4 or 5 weeks away from training camps, about 6 weeks away from the Hall of Fame game in the NFL preseason, and 2.5 months away from the start of the regular season. So we've got a lot of work to do to prepare everyone for their NFL fantasy football drafts. I know I've been preparing. BC, what have you been doing to prepare yourself?
Well, I've been hitting the gym, down 26 pounds as of this recording. So, I'm getting not only my body ready, but I'm getting my mind ready for fantasy football. As always, I'm listening to podcasts, not only watching ours, because I love seeing our beautiful faces, but something interesting that I've done, I keep insane records. I mean, I can tell you my first fantasy draft, who my first pick was, Jerry Rice when he was with the Raiders. Great job, me. And I constantly keep records. So I've gone back, and I advise anybody to do this. Look at previous instances. Look at previous records. Look at previous decisions you've made, not only with your league, but also with who you're in a league with, and let that kind of let your future. I was going to try and sound philosophical, but I'm coming off like a fortune cookie. So just learn your past and let it help your future. And this has been your BC Steele fortune of the day.
Well, I think that's a good mentality to have for sure. Once we're done with this, I know I plan on releasing an article kind of highlighting your do's and do nots for fantasy football drafts and your leagues. And one of the things I'm highest on is just paying attention to the habits of the people that you're in a league with. Now, sometimes you don't have an advantage. Like if you join a random Yahoo league, it's probably going to take you at least a couple weeks to get an idea of how the people around you play. But man, like a perfect example in our Dynasty League is we have one guy who really likes the Seahawks. So if I'm able to draft someone on my team from the Seahawks and he starts to even do remotely well, I know I can probably overcharge that kid to get something back from him because he's a fan. Well, that's kind of a profile of fantasy football players. So we'll go over all that. I'm kind of keeping together. I want it to be comprehensive. I don't want it to be here's just 2 things you want to notice. Anyway, that'll be coming. We've got a lot of great content coming to Research Fantasy. Today we're here to talk about my wide receiver rankings, which I personally think are going to be a lot different than you'll see on a lot of places. I'm more of a risk taker, and I'm very opinionated. So my top 5 reads right now: Julio Jones, Odell Beckham Jr., Antonio Brown, Michael Thomas, T.Y. Hilton. BC, go.
Well, I can't really make the argument as far as the top 3.
Let me pause too. It's important to mention here that this is for standard scoring. Go ahead.
Unpause. Top 3, I definitely can't argue. I think you can make the case for any of them being number 1. I would probably have AB, Julio, and Beckham, but I would have it 1A, 1B, and then maybe
3.
Beckham being 3rd. Yeah, just so really no arguments there. Michael Thomas, Cooks is gone. I agree it's going to be the Michael Thomas show. I think that's higher than some may have him, but I know you're very high on Michael Thomas. I like Michael Thomas. T.Y. Hilton is interesting to me. Don't hate it, but for me, I think I'm willing to go with a Mike Evans. I'll go with 6 through 8. Jordy Nelson, Mike Evans, and A.J. Green. A nudge over T.Y. Hilton, only because that offensive line did get a little bit of help, but not enough. The benefit is the defense didn't sign Lawrence Taylor in his prime. They didn't sign, Troy Polamalu in his prime. They didn't really make any huge splashes there, so that does help. I'm also not buying into the fact that you're going to have Hilton and Moncrief and Philip Dorsett, and it just be a hodgepodge of targets to go around. So I don't hate the Hilton pick, but I would have him a smidge lower.
To me, the Hilton thing just comes down to not really a huge believer at the end of the day in Andrew Luck's reliance on the tight ends, and I don't think there's just going to be one tight end. I think those going after Jack Doyle are going to be in for the same type of haunting that Dwayne Allen and Kobe Fleener saw there, where they just eat away at each other's production. I'm a big believer in Moncrief. I think he's going to be a touchdown target. I think Hilton he's the guy. I mean, he does everything else. So he's going to be a high volume receiver. Probably plays out better, a little better in PPR formats because of the fluctuation of his touchdowns. But if you play in a league that has those like 3 points for 100-yard game type situation, like that's a guy I want. Like some of the other guys might be a little more dependent on touchdown. Not above him, of course, not above him. But that's my take on it. 6 through 10, like you said, Nelson, Evans, Green, Amari Cooper, Alshon Jeffrey. I'm not high on Mike Evans. I just think, and I don't remember if we discussed this in the last video or not with Jameis Winston, but there's no way his targets stay where they're at. That is not necessarily to say that he can't do well with less targets. Like, how many of those targets were just had to do it, and the best chance I have at completing this pass are Mike Evans? So he probably profiles out as having an inefficient, ratio of catches to targets. So I think that narrows. I think he probably, from an efficiency perspective, looks much better. But you got Deshaun Jackson, you got Chris Godwin, you got O.J. Howard, you got Cameron Brate, you got Doug Martin, you got Charles Sims. We're talking way too many names right now for me to feel entirely comfortable. I liked the Mike Evans I was getting last year, who was sitting maybe right outside the top 10. I think that's where he was. I don't remember. Maybe he was in that, let's just call it 8 to 12. I've seen him as high as 4, maybe even 3 on some people's lists. I can't commit to that.
A name that's on here, speaking of not being able to commit, I'm not going to put a ring on it. It makes my beehole pucker a little bit. Just hearing his name, there's a lovely image for our viewers. But he's the guy that could fit. You said 8 to 12. This is a guy that could be number 5, or he could be number 55, and that's Alshon Jeffrey in Philly. Carson Wentz, I would say the best quarterback he's ever played with. Granted, I'm not a Jay Cutler fan whatsoever. But Alshon Jeffrey could be in for a monster year, or he could be hurt in week 4 and he goes around the bowl and down the hole, and next year he, takes another 1-year deal somewhere else. It's going to be an interesting year for Alshon Jeffrey and owners. I'm staying away from him just because I don't need that injury risk. Also, Dez Bryant, I'm almost at that point. I just worry about Dez Bryant's injury history. But that said, at 10, you're putting him as a low wide receiver 1, same Dez Bryant, low wide receiver 1, high wide receiver 2. I'm just going to say it. I don't like 10 through 12. I don't like Jeffrey, don't like Dez Bryant. Number 12, DeAndre Hopkins. I'm still stinging a little bit from the quarterback who shan't be named, who messed up all Houston ownership last year.
So let me ask you this. Is it I don't like them, I don't want to draft them on my fantasy teams type situation, as opposed to where you would have them ranked? Because it's just very difficult to look at those names and say, I want to have, Demaryius Thomas over them. I want to have Doug Baldwin over them. Like, in most situations, I probably want to have those guys. I'm not in disagreement with you, because sometimes you just do that, especially when you're picking there. All those guys are quality names. If you're picking at 10 and you've got 8 through 20 on the board, if you don't like those 3 guys at 10 through 12, are you really off by taking an AJ Green or a Devonta Adams? I don't think you are, but I don't know. Doug Baldwin, Allen Robinson, Devonta Adams round off the top 15. I'm an Adams believer. Little bit nervous this year, though. What gives? Is it Jordy Nelson, or is it Devontae Adams when it comes to Randall Cobb having some kind of an impact on this team? Or does Cobb just not have a role anymore?
I'm not going to say it's as bad as trying to figure out New England running backs, but there's going to be weeks where you're thinking, wow, I got a great matchup. Same with DFS. This is my guy because it's Green Bay. It's Aaron Rodgers, and you get 2 points from your wide receiver. So
I'm pretty sure Jordy Nelson had like 20 fantasy points every week from like week 6 on. I think that's actually true. But
between Cobb and Devontae Adams, not throwing Jordy Nelson in there. I mean, he's not bulletproof, but of the three, he's definitely the safer of the two. Adams and Cobb, for me, it splits. I think that's personal preference. I like Devontae Adams more, but for me, that's a split. Allen Robinson, I'm sorry, I'm almost off of that. Same with Demaryius Thomas. He's 29 years old. He's going to be 30, and the stat I read, I'm trying to remember the specifics, but of the wide receivers that have had a top 12 performance coming off their age 29 season, I think there's only been 3 or 4. Now, I'm sure now that I said that, if we looked up the stat, it would show that there's been, hundreds, but I'm pretty sure that's the stat. Plus, Peyton Manning isn't throwing the ball anymore. I don't think Paxton Lynch or Trevor Siemian is the answer there. So for me, thanks to Demaryius Thomas, thanks to Emmanuel Sanders for your service for those few good years, but we're done. We need to move on.
Yeah, I'm not in disagreement. That's how a lot of people feel already about Sammy Watkins. At 18, we've got Brandon Cooks, 19, Donta Moncrief, 20, Keenan Allen. I think the biggest slight on any of those guys would be Moncrief. Well, obviously, other than the fact that Allen has been injured a lot and is coming off a very serious injury. A lot of people looking at Moncrief saying very touchdown dependent, hard to trust a guy like that. Not necessarily too opposed to it. I've been taking him a lot. This is much, much higher than you're going to find him a lot of other places. But I'm going to do that with guys that I'm bullish on.
I don't totally hate any of those names there as far as a guy that you can get value on and have him outperform his ADP and have him outperform where he is in the rankings. I will say Jarvis Landry at 21, he's a guy that could jump up, especially in PPR. He's a PPR
he could be a top 10 PPR receiver, Absolutely. Even if he doesn't. So let me explain that, because this, of all of these picks here, this is the one that needs really explained. Jarvis Landry is a top 5 wide receiver if he can catch 10 touchdowns.
Absolutely.
Because the yards are there, the catches are there, everything you would want is there, but he doesn't score touchdowns. He's a check down guy who, he's the kind of guy who catches 14 balls a game for 89 to 105 yards and has how many touchdowns did he have last year? I'm going to guess it's 1 or 2. Maybe 4. I don't think it's that many.
I want to say 3, but I'm not positive on that. A guy that I am positive on, just like Eazy-E, well, not just like Eazy-E, but Tyreek Hill. Macklin is gone. Macklin, we could sit here and talk about Macklin in Kansas City, but Tyreek Hill to me was the number 1 guy last year, especially at the end of the year. So I like Tyreek Hill. However, Kansas City doesn't get it done throwing the ball up, 30, 40 times a game. So keep that in mind.
So Landry, just to put it out there, 94 receptions, 1336 yards, 4 touchdowns. Here's something about Hill, too. They're not going to have him returning. I don't know if it was kicks and punts or just punts, but I did read that he's not going to be involved in at least one facet of the return game. So
that does hurt a little bit.
Right. I mean, if anything, it hurts their defense and special teams. That's 6 points for a touchdown return that he had 2 or 3 of last year.
There will be a drop. Now this is where it goes way in depth, but there will be a drop in Kansas City special teams defense value. Just something to kind of keep in the back of your head. You and I have talked. That's your last pick in a draft. You can always pick a guy up out of the pool,
right.
But if you're one of those people, it's like, I'm going to draft my defense in the 10th round. You want to keep away from Kansas City. A guy from going 23 on to 30, we've got Crowder, Garcon, Golden Tate, Emmanuel Sanders, Julian Edelman, Deshaun Jackson, Michael Crabtree, and Larry Fitzgerald at 30. two guys here that I'm going to throw out, and I'll ask you if supporting cast helps or hurts. Deshaun Jackson going to Tampa Bay. Does Mike Evans help or hurt his value compared to last year in Washington? And Julian Edelman in New England. Does Brandon Cooks help or hurt Julian Edelman in New England?
Neutral for both.
Neutral. Okay.
I think both of their games are what they are regardless of where they're at.
Well, then let me give you a third. Larry Fitzgerald. Well, no, because they added somebody, but that's not a real thing. I was trying to throw. Oh no! Wait, no. They added. Who did they add? It was a later wide receiver pick. It's getting hyped.
Yeah. The kid that's supposed to be the next Chad Williams, I think.
Yeah.
From Graham.
Jamison Crowder in Washington. We saw Terrell Pryor go there. Help or hurt?
Help. Let me just say, from 23 to 36, I'm not touching any of those guys. That's a range where I'm finding myself basically, I might take Corey Coleman here or there, but I'm basically out on all of those guys. I like Jamison Crowder. He's Cousins' safety blanket, like it's him and Reed. We'll get to a guy that I'm definitely not high on in just a minute here, but Crowder, to me, where he's going drafted, awesome. Thank you very much for your free gift. Thanks for your contribution. Pierre Garçon, he's entering into competition with, I think, Aldrick Robinson, Bruce Ellington, and Jeremy Curley. Okay, well, he's won that without even stepping on the field. Been ultra consistent in a Shanahan offense that he knows, with Brian Hoyer, who we've discussed many, many, many times, is not bad. I
until
think,
he gets hurt.
Until he gets hurt. I think you could be at the high end of Garçon, could be top 25 wide receiver, which is where I have him. And then Golden Tate. Again, Marvin Jones looked awful last year. Beyond him, they were relying on guys like TJ Jones. I mean, it's going to be Tate. Again, I don't know how consistent he can be, but all the rest of those guys, probably my least favorite on that list is 35, Terrell Pryor. There's no way at all I can honestly consider Terrell Pryor, who had a perfect situation in Cleveland and they didn't want to keep him, go to a team that has two players that are already inundated with the quarterback and how things work and they're his check down and all that jazz. I don't see how Pryor goes there. And then Josh Doxson is coming back. I just don't see how people are expecting him to return the value where he's going. And he keeps getting drafted higher and higher. And he's just, that's something when I'm not, if I'm wrong, good, great, fine, whatever. I don't care. I'd rather be wrong than pay what looks to me to be like the bust price for Terrell Pryor.
I definitely think Terrell Pryor could be a bust. It's a little confusing to me knowing what he got, that he didn't stay in Cleveland. There could be reasons there that we haven't found out yet. We see Randall Cobb there at 40. Talked about him earlier. Four guys that are interesting to me, two of them on the same team, actually. Corey Davis and Rashard Matthews for Tennessee. Now, if Decker goes there, that does play a factor into it, but leave that without Decker at this point. And also interesting to me, Quincy Enunwa, who's the default number one at this point, and Willie Snead at 43 in New Orleans now that Cooks is gone. You're looking at, I would say, wide receiver for Corey Davis, Rashard Matthews, Willie Snead, Quincy Enunwa, even Zay Jones at 46 for Buffalo. I think those five names that you have right there are going to be your wide receiver four. Guys that you're going to probably, if all goes well, hopefully fit in on your bye week. Maybe if you go strong at running back because you have a flex, maybe you pick up one of these guys as a third. Davis and Matthews, jury's out. Enunwa may be the target man there. But Willie Snead is very, very interesting to me. Had some big games last year, but what we saw was at times with Fleener and with Cooks, almost forgot his name, all those great goal line carries that Mark Ingram got because Sean Payton's his BFF. Sometimes there just wasn't enough to go around for Willie Snead, and I actually think this could be a bigger year for him. Judging him as a wide receiver 4, he could flirt with wide receiver 2 numbers.
Yeah, I mean, where you're getting him, I'm not going to say he's not a good pick. I like the 36 through 40 as well. Parker, Devonta Parker, John Brown, Martavis Bryant, Brashard Perriman, Randall Cobb. Those are all guys I think that have intriguing ceilings. 48, Cameron Meredith. Mike Wallace, he still is what he is in Baltimore. I mean, there's not a reason to kind of bypass him. Then things really, really, really start to get ugly. I mean, we're looking at now at this 50 beyond down, and there's just nothing that really jumps out at me and says, well, this guy, or well, this guy. Tyrell Williams at 59 was actually wide receiver 15 last year. But wow. That was without Keenan Allen, that was without Mike Williams, and I think it's a little bit foolish to expect that. I'm going to have to go back and look to see. I believe he was around the year before. I'd be interested to see like what his contribution looked like there. There's some intrigue to Ted Ginn. Maybe Robbie Anderson, because he's another guy that could be a pass catcher. Cole Beasley had a good year last year. Malcolm Mitchell is talented. Then you start to get into some real punt situations like Curtis Samuel, who has a lot of talent, a lot of speed, can line up at H-back, can line up as a wide receiver. Kenny Golladay been making waves at the Lions OTAs. Ditto for Taywan Taylor.
What about Tavon Austin? The all that money he got, he's so great. Come on, man.
I have no idea. It probably will be this year since everybody's off him.
I don't think there's a person now listening to this, watching this, that is excited about Tavon Austin, with the exception of being possibly Tavon Austin himself and his close family.
Yeah, at 83, Michael Floyd, I have a feeling he's going to plummet down the list a littleit. Typically not a good when you're setting off your ankle bracelet because you've been drinking. So I don't know if you caught that snippet, but he's definitely in more legal trouble. So hopefully he can get his stuff together. But it's really just, I've heard rumblings that Kamar Aiken could threaten Dante Moncrief in Indianapolis. But he didn't threaten anybody in Baltimore, but somehow he's going to do it to Moncrief in Indianapolis. I'm a little suspect on that.
It's very weird when we get stories. I'm going to throw a name out at you, and then I have a game to play, if you will. Do you want to play a game?
Sure.
That sounded more pedophilish than it did Jigsaw. But
there's no question.
Also, Nick, if you're interested after this, I have some free candy if you'd be interested.
I'm done. Go ahead.
Damn. No, Cooper Kupp for the LA Rams. Is it feasible that he ends the year as the number one?
I mean, it's going to be hard for him to end the year number one overall over guys like Julio and Odell Beckham. I'm just kidding.
I mean, for the Rams.
It is, yeah. I mean, I know there was a report that came out that said he was potentially going to be the safety blanket for Jared Goff. I mean, you can't look past situations like that because it could happen. You're getting him like really late.
I'll tell you what, if he ends the year as the number one wide receiver over Odell, Julio, and AB, I will get his name tattooed on my forehead.
Yeah, you should. You should.
No. Let me rephrase. I'll get his name tattooed on my butt because I don't want that on my forehead.
Yeah, I don't know why Cooper Kupp walking around your whole life. There's really nobody else on here to me right now that holds a lot of intrigue. If it was anybody, I would say it would likely be Rashard Higgins. I have a sneaking suspicion that somehow the Browns end up landing Eric Decker. Just don't know what it is. Kind of seems like that would be the mold that they try to follow. You get the guy that really can't find a deal anywhere else. But if not, Higgins looks like he could take a bigger role this year. Tough to say what that would be.
You know what? I'm just going to say, if the Browns got Decker, that's not the worst thing in the world for them. I mean,
no.
It's weird that you're saying, oh, that's good, but then when it's the Browns, it's the greatest move in the world just because of their history. So
right.
The game we're going to play is from 100 on. Give me 2 or 3 guys that gun to your head. Hey, you need to pick, which I don't know why somebody would have a gun to your head for this, but you have to pick 3 guys that are going to perform that are going to be valuable fantasy assets this year. 100 on, and give me 2 or 3 guys.
Well, just shoot me in the head. I'm fine with that. Well, oh man, there is a lot of junk here.
Well, if you'd like, because this is obviously a leading question, I have 3.
Well, all right, I'll give you 3 of mine. If I'm going to have to, Chris Godwin,
like holding back a fart.
Chris Godwin has some potential. He was very, very, very good at Penn State. I don't know what the learning curve is going to be like, but I like rookies. That's all I'm going to say. I don't know what it is. I feel like, I guess it's, I like feeling like I'm the smart guy in the room when I get it right, because it happens so infrequently. Beyond that, I would, one guy that jumps out to me is Chad Hansen. Again, on this horrible Jets team. But he came out of the woodwork at Cal last year with Davis Webb. And watching this kid play, he knows where his body is at. He knows how to get his feet in bounds. He knows how to use his body to influence defenders to allow them to let him make catches. His hand strength is incredible. There's just something that tells me he could end up being the guy that ends up breaking out for that team this year.
Interesting.
Beyond that,
I can throw you 2. Actually, there's 4 guys, but they're on the 2
just
of them.
go ahead. Let me hear yours. You're clearly loaded up for this one.
I am fully loaded and ready to. Well, anyway. With Pittsburgh, you got Sammy Coates and Juju Smith-Schuster. The reason I'm going there is Bryant says he's good, and at this point you got to take him for face value. But if he ends up leaving for smoking the happy smoke, for eating the marijuanas, then Coates or Juju Smith-Schuster fits into a nice role there as the number 2, and that's a valuable role in that Steelers offense. Nothing to speak of at tight end, really. No disrespect to Double J, Jesse James, but not a top pass catcher. So that would be an interesting role. Even as a number 3, there's some value there. And also, simply by default, we've got Bruce Ellington 115 and Jeremy Curley at 103. Brian Hoyer has talent. He is good until he goes down. And I'm not willing to say that I am on the bandwagon for these guys, but Brian Hoyer is your guy as far as starter goes. And Matt Barkley, we didn't see much in Philly. We saw him in Chicago. He had a good start and then kind of went around the bowl and down the hole. If he can be cultivated, he may not be a bad option. I want to say a poor man's Brian Hoyer, funnily enough, which they both went from Chicago last year, are both now in San Francisco. So those are guys where, hey, if you're looking to throw a dart, you could do a lot worse than Coates, Curley, Smith-Schuster, or Bruce Ellington.
God, San Francisco really took everything from Chicago.
They did. Like, I actually think that, even though it has nothing to do with the draft, I think John Lynch saw that and went, that's a good strategy. Why don't we just keep this flow going? And if we're going to go really, really, really deep, just because he's last on the list here, Brian Walters, Jacksonville. Only because Allen Robinson, to me, I'm not on that hype train. And I also go Charles Johnson in Carolina and I'm not making fun of him. It's just somebody else put it out there. Calvin Benjamin looks like Queen Latifah.
Oh, boy.
Who I had a crush on, and if you haven't seen Last Holiday, the second time I've referenced it, that's a good movie. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah,
so.
Are we getting a kickback from the sales, just out of curiosity? I hope you've negotiated that. I have a feeling... Go ahead.
If I negotiated to get kickbacks on a movie and I chose Last Holiday as the movie, I'm a really, really bad businessman. And actually, we can't see it, but I think that DVD is behind me in my entertainment center in the office. So
well, I'm sure you'll be watching it tonight. Let's play the same game we did with running backs. Who do you see in that upper tier that could end up going down? What are you giggling about?
The fact that I'm sure you're going to watch it tonight, not even a joke. You're just absolutely convinced. Yeah, he's going to watch that. Why wouldn't he?
He just said he had a crush. I mean, come on.
I did. I had a huge crush. No. As far as we're going top 10, as far as guys that could fall, or top 20.
Yeah.
Okay, we can do
guys that you just don't see being there.
You know, I can't stop thinking about Queen Latifah right now. But one, Demaryius Thomas, for the reasons I mentioned earlier. I don't know what that team is going to be, but I think it's going to be defense, killing the clock with whoever is running the ball. And two is Alshon Jeffrey. This could come back to bite me if he's healthy, but I haven't seen anything to make me believe he's healthy, anything to make me believe he's going to be able to go a full season. So for me, Demaryius Thomas and Alshon Jeffrey are my big possibility to drop.
Yeah, I'm going to go with, I mean, Mike Evans is my guy pretty clearly. I don't really know if I would take anyone else here. I just think that there's too much going on there. I think that, you know, if we're expecting Doug Martin to come back strong, if we're expecting Deshaun Jackson to do what he does, and Chris Godwin to be good, and O.J. Howard to be good, and Cameron Brate to be good, Winston's going to have to pass for like 7,000 yards for all of this to be possible. So I think that Evans' fantasy production, it could be one of those situations that occur all the time in baseball where a guy is just a better football player than he is a fantasy football player. So it's very possible that that's what happens. He takes the hit for the team, doesn't turn out as well in fantasy circles. Who's your pick to rise up that list and really shock some people this year?
Kelvin Benjamin, because he looks like the star of single team. You know, before the podcast, we said we were going to change the name to something. I think we should change it to the Queen Latifah podcast, quite frankly.
That's fine. We'll discuss fantasy football.
Absolutely. No, in all seriousness, Brandon Marshall, I think could be an interesting pick at 31 as a guy that could put up wide receiver 1 numbers, especially on certain weeks. You know, Odell Beckham could fight with the net again and go down. And the other guy, mentioned him a little bit earlier, but Zay Jones. I have no faith that Sammy Watkins is going to be healthy all year. I own him in our Dynasty League. I have no faith at all that he's going to play 16 games, and that holds the spot open for Zay Jones. They have a good run game. They have a good defense. And, you know, you're not going to be putting 4 or 5 in the box when you've got LaShawn McCoy in the backfield. So Zay Jones could carve out a little nice role for himself, currently 46, could put up high wide receiver 3 numbers, if not wide receiver 2.
All right, I'm going to tell you a name, and I think that this is going to be shocking. Shocking. A guy who I think is going to end up finishing far better than where he's ranked is Amari Cooper. And he's ranked 9th.
Yes, he is.
I firmly believe, for no reason other than this is his 3rd year, he's been good, he just hasn't really put it all together. I think this is when he does put it all together. Arguably the best running back situation they've had there. Bringing Jared Cook in helps open up that offense, gives Carr a more reliable third hand to catch touchdowns. That was something we discussed being a fault of Carr, or something that we held against him in the last podcast. So I think it wouldn't shock me if Cooper ends up putting up, you know, top 5 numbers. And this is a guy that I'm ranking higher than a lot of other people to begin with as it is. So I think he could end up being a real steal. And I'm torn between Devonta Parker and Jarvis Landry, but I'm holding out hope. And in PPR leagues, it's not going to matter because he's being drafted high as it is already. But I'm holding out hope that he cracks like 8 touchdowns this year, because this guy's got top 10 receiver written all over him. He's unheralded because of how things work. You know, at the end of the day, I see this offense coming down to... And then you've got a tight end who's not a blocker. It's Julius Thomas. And you could say whatever you want about him, but he's back with the guy who took him to success to begin with, in Adam Gase. So they clearly know how to utilize his strengths best in this offense. We have to see it played before anything else. But he's one of those tight ends I was telling you about that's not getting drafted, that if you just miss out on everyone you like, might as well just punt. They said he could catch 10 touchdowns. Make them prove it to you.
Not the worst strategy, definitely. And we've seen history dictate it's possible.
All right, that wraps it up for today. Our top, 100-ish wide receivers, 150. Hope you enjoyed. You can subscribe to the podcast below. Check us out at researchfantasy.com. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Research and Win. BC.
At 1SF Podcast on Facebook, on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, BC_Steele, where I'm going to rant and rave and show my Mighty Ducks jersey. Other than that, you can reprise the theme song and roll the credits.